I'll pause it now, and when we start up.
All right. So are there any minutes from any previous meetings from long ago? I don't have any.
There's videos.
Yeah, we have videos.
I think probably, to be truthful, I think that backgrounder sheet is just as good as any minutes. Because it really does summarize where we got to before we stopped meeting.
Which you're talking about the explainer?
Yeah,
It's what referred to. Has everybody received that explainer?
this one.
Okay. So we're here as a result of a number of things, most of which is the passing of the budget, which freed up the monies. And so now we can move towards this vote, this referendum vote, in order to get town approval to expend the money. That's my understanding as to how this works. And this committee is basically involved in the informational part of this project at this point, and setting up the timeline to get us to that vote. I think there has to be an actual informational meeting 2 weeks within the window. Is that right, Gordon?
Yeah, we can go over, we'll do that all in time. Because
Okay.
I have been talking to Steve and the town bond council there. So maybe just take the first item first, the funding. As Todd said, we did receive word that the town was patient and received $3 million of funding, or will receive $3 million of funding for the project in West Cornwall. It's part of this year's operating federal budget of the United States. And then the other funding component of that is USDA. So talking to the bond council, he wanted, because time has gone on, he wanted Steve to update the cost estimate, which he did. And I believe you have a copy of that. The cost estimate went up from $5 million to $6.2 million. And the other thing we have done for funding is to reapply to USDA for their loan and grant program. So Steve WMC has done that, is doing that, or how have you submitted that application yet, Steve? For
Not exactly. We have made contact with the appropriate person. Now we do have permission to file it. Actually, thank you, Gordon, for allowing us to do that. So that'll be very shortly. That'll be in.
Yeah, because every year we have to, if you don't get a grant one year, you have to refile annually with USDA. And as they've already identified, town is eligible for a low interest loan. At this point in the explanations, that's what we're counting on for the balance of the funding. So $3 million for from the federal government, and a $3.2 million loan from USDA, which the town would have to repay over 20 years.
Gordon, some part of that could be an outright grant, couldn't it?
Correct.
I mean, it's going to be
Correct.
some combination of.
Correct. But we, again, to go over the particulars of how this process works, the USDA is not going to invest a lot of time reviewing our project as much as we like it until they get a town affirmative vote. They will tell us we're eligible for their loan program, but they will not tell us if we will get any grants, according to Steve, according to them, until the town passes an affirmative vote, and then they will dig into the project and see through their formulas if they will also give us a grant. There may be others, grants the town can apply for. But we don't want to apply for anything that would supersede or endanger the federal funding. But there may be, for example, some ARPA money left for this. This is certainly an ARPA eligible expense. Or there may be some state money kicking around. There may be more federal money. So anyway, we're trying, as our mission is to try to get the best deal for the town, maximize the grants. We will be doing that as we speak, as we go to the voters. We haven't nailed down any other significant pots of money. What
Hey,
Barbara,
Gordon, can I just
Yes,
bring up this? Somebody just called in asking if
What?
you could allow the people out in the waiting room in.
yes.
Just wanted to let
Okay.
you know. Gotta let everybody know.
Okay, yeah, it'd be good if the people identified themselves, but we're just gonna take a chance. Okay, got it. Thank you, Richard. So anyway, Barbara has two things on the loan. Steve has talked to the USDA, the new USDA person. We have outlived the first USDA person in the process. So, I mean, not literally, but he is retired. So we have a new person, and Steve talked to him about, as we know, two compelling things that are happening right now that weren't happening 2 years ago, where the construction costs have gone up and continue to go up, and interest rates may be going up. So as of the last word, the USDA say they have not bumped their loan rates at this point, but a compelling argument to be going on this, to get on this, is to get ahead of the increase in interest rates and increasing construction costs. But the good news is that with the additional funding from the federal government, that more or less offsets the cost increase at this point. And we are still looking at being able to, if we have to bond this, be able to do it for approximately the same amount as the school bond is costing us now. So I think that's the funding end of it, which is explained, pretty succinctly in the narrative. Are there any questions about that? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. We're not trying to, we are going to keep on trying to get more grants, but we're explaining it that we got $3 million federal money, and we're eligible for a standard USDA rural development loan for 3.2 million, which again has an estimated interest rate under 2%, which again we're trying to jump on. Are there any questions about the funding part of this?
Gordon, just you did make the comment that there might be a source of money that would put our federal grant in peril. Can you be more specific about that?
Well, I mean, what I heard was say that, and Steve may know this more than I do, but the bond council brought that up, that you can get sort of competing grants, and then one says, well, we'll give you the money as long as you're not getting X amount from another grant. So for example, if we get a state clean water grant, USDA may reduce our grant by the amount the state gives us. So again, we're pretty cautious on just keeping it pretty simple.
Steve, could I ask a question? Just when you costed this out, I realize we're not at the budget yet, but the fact that we've got this federal money and actually two sources of federal money means that we have to observe that federal pay rate for everybody working on the project, right?
I would say so. If it was USDA money, I'm not sure that applies. But for this particular grant, this is a different type of grant. I've not honestly experienced, had the luck of getting a grant like this. This is you folks are extremely lucky to get this grant, and thanks to Joanna Hayes. But so I'm not sure, but if that has to comply with the wage rates or not. USDA does not require it because, again, that can drive the cost of the project up, and that their whole thing is to make it as affordable as possible.
Okay, thanks.
I could comment on the USDA grant loan.
Whatever,
Typically-
yeah, we're here to talk, so tell us
Typically,
more.
what they do is they base the grant loan on income levels and affordability of the project. So what they will do is they'll take the cost of the project and then they'll deduct the $3 million grant. And then that'll convert into if you take the raw net cost after that grant and you divide it by the number of potential users or assessees, that's going to come out with a cost per dwelling unit, for example. And that's what they'll look at. And then they'll say, okay, based on income, this is what a typical equivalent dwelling unit can afford. Anything above that is eligible for grant funds. So I think you still are eligible for grants and loans, but the question, as Gordon said, we're not going to know that until we actually pass the project and they look at it in some detail. But at a minimum, you're eligible for loan. And Gordon mentioned, I know the town won't go past 20 years, but your document correctly indicates that if town wanted to, they could go to a 40-year loan.
Mhm.
I know the town probably not in favor of that, but your informational sheet does say 40 years, which is correct.
Do we get to
and-
decide, whether we want a 20 or a 30 or a 40 from the USDA? Or do they,
Richard, I'm not exactly sure about that. Typically, most towns will take it for the 40 years and then look for a better deal for long-term financing
Right.
and then immediately pay off the USDA loan. Most projects take grant and take loan, and you have to take the loan in order to get the grant money, essentially. But that's not to say the day you close on the loan, you couldn't pay it back the next day,
Mhm.
type of thing, if you find a better deal through open bond market or whatever, or some other source. So it doesn't have to be 40 years. You can, so the most prudent people would take the 40 years offering the lowest payment and then try to come up with a better way to pay it off.
And that interest rate, say it's 1.75, which probably is going to be below
Right.
market rate. Is that locked in for that whole 40-year span?
Yes, and when it gets
Okay.
locked in, it's once they accept the application and approve it, then the interest rate at that time is locked in.
Okay.
If during the course of the project design and construction, the rate goes up, you're still locked into the lower rate. If the rate goes down for some reason, you can take advantage of the lower rate.
Wowzer,
Yeah.
great.
And again, depending on the affordability, the poverty rate, they have different rates for different levels of income. The poverty rate, which is the least income, and I don't think you are there, but that rate's down to like 1.35%.
Okay.
is there,
Okay.
the discussion is about financing, but if the cost estimate that Steve has put forth at 6.2 million, is that correct? I think 6.2,
Yes.
which is an increase from several years ago when this, I'm not sure if that was 7 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, or exactly when the original estimate came forward. Nobody should be surprised that the estimates have gone up.
Mhm.
But I guess my question is, how confident are you about that estimate?
Well, it's a very volatile market. I've had some discussions with various people. I talked to people that design and build the treatment plant portion of this type of project, and their costs have gone up as everybody's has. And then I spoke to our representative at USDA, and some of the projects in Massachusetts are coming in like 30% over budget. Gordon's had some contact with the town of Old Lyme, Gordon,
I haven't really I was referred to them. I haven't.
Okay.
talked-
and they had a project that came in significantly over budget. So I'm pretty comfortable with the number, but you never can tell. I mean, until you get it designed.
Are there any
and then
more
bid.
talk on the funding, and then we can dig into the cost estimate?
Sorry about jumping ahead there.
It's okay, you're ahead of the curve. All good questions. So anyway, the funding, I think, is pretty straightforward. I mean, we're optimistic again of maybe being able to get some more grants, but again, we've got a good one there. So Cost estimate, Steve? Did everybody get the cost
Yeah, I just
estimate?
bumped everything up, basically. I couldn't find the last estimate. I got so many estimates we've done for the project, but the last estimate overall was like 5 million. I went back and I looked up and I drew up basically a new estimate, refined it a little bit, bumped up all the costs, still kept a contingency in there, and came up with the number that you see in that estimate before you. Again, we also have to consider that, this project isn't going to be built this year or next year. It's going to be a couple of years down the road by the time design and permitting occur. So there's going to be some inflation, perhaps. I hope for deflation, but typically it doesn't happen. I do think costs seem to be artificially high at this point due to material question. I'm hoping that levels itself out or actually maybe go back a bit once supply chain issues relax.
Steve, I had a question about the extent of the system. We've now got language that says adjacent property owners, meaning people who are alongside Route 128. But we've always been talking about going down, some distance down some of the side roads.
Yep.
How are you thinking about that?
Basically, the design of the key issue is the design of the plant, the treatment plant. So to make sure it's not just designed for 10 homes, 20 homes or businesses,
Right.
but that it's got the room to accept, future flows. And Todd's harped on this forever since the start of this project. And so we're very cognizant of that. And the system and then the collection system, which probably is going to be what we call a low pressure system, will be designed to accept additional, properties into it. So we're trying to, engineers, we always try to be flexible with these systems so that unforeseen things can happen in the future and we can accommodate them.
Right. Because I'm thinking if we wound up putting in half a mile of connecting pipe down side roads, would that be covered by what we've got here, basically?
No.
Okay.
We don't believe so. I think the budget's fairly tight. I'm a little nervous, as everybody is, about the costs and then what's happening, worldwide. But no, we don't have any money in this for the side roads. Having said that, if the planets align and the thing gets designed and we get a good bid price and we have extra money, then you certainly have the opportunity to extend lines down other roads at that time.
Okay. Because
Now-
yeah.
I was going
Go
to say,
ahead.
when we initially applied to USDA, when we showed them the potential service area, it included the whole village area, so to speak. So all the environmental documentation and other documentation is all done for the entire area. So there should be no issues in terms of funding through USDA, for example.
Okay.
Just to be clear again, the side road it's down Route 128, it's down Lower River Road, and it's in back to the Railroad Square? not
I'd have to
in-
look at the exact map, Todd, but
I don't think it was.
I think it's just the core.
just the
Just-
core.
I don't think you're going down side roads unless you do an alternate bid. I think this is just the core at this point. And then if people want to tie on, then it's, sort of it's at their expense, or we could put out a bid document that does alternates.
Right.
But I think at this point, we're talking about the 128 corridor. That's
Well,
about it.
Sorry, but there's where you lose me. Because I think it's up to the town to go down those side roads to the householder who wants to hook up. I don't see why they have to pay for the access all the way out to 128. That doesn't make sense to me.
Well,
That's why I'm asking about
if I could
this.
comment on that, that's kind of a potential future issue to decide. I think what you folks or we're trying to do is serve the core area as a primary area. And if other areas want to join in the future, that could be a different project. Or if we have money left over in this project, we could extend lines to certain areas. But I can tell you that if there's grant money left over, you ought to spend it. So let's see what happens.
So the EDUs will only reflect what can be reached contiguous to the core.
That's the safe bet. We typically, again, assume that there's going to be some future connections type. Most towns will not, again, if you set an assessment per unit of, say, you said $3,500 or whatever it is, then that's it. But normally what happens is at the end of the project, the net project cost after the grants are removed gets divided in some equitable manner between all of the users. So we always plan for some future users because there's always going to be something in line extensions, a fill-in project, that type of thing. So we wouldn't necessarily, my opinion is you wouldn't necessarily take the net cost and divide it by the 20 units that are there. You might assume 30 units, for example.
Oh. I think we ought to at some point hear what it would cost to extend at least down Lower River Road.
Well, we've got those, the original, we did all that before. We could update those for you folks.
I think you were talking, any of those extensions were hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's, you know, and we're already up to 6.2. That's why we settled at 6.2. And if somehow somebody can figure out how to do it less, then we do less. But it's substantial extra,
Mhm.
I think.
Yes, it would be, because again, the system's not designed yet, but the plan right now is, if it's us, we look at it in detail. Is everybody gonna have a pump and we do a low pressure system? Or if the system could be potentially large in the future, do we design a pump station and everything flows by gravity to it and then gets pumped to the location of the treatment plant, wherever that might be? But those are some options that you look at during the design process. See what the most cost-effective method of sewering the area is. But in any event, extending lines is not cheap. So,
And there could be other grant programs too, because other
Right.
towns used all their ARPA money to extend sewer lines. So, you
yeah,
never know.
that's a program that Gordon mentioned, that program is sort of limited, right, in what you can use it for. And wastewater is certainly one that you can use it for.
Right. The other thing too, is I'd like to get Torrington Area Health to weigh in to some degree on which side roads, like I'm thinking Railroad Street, have had problematic septic system issues in the past, as opposed to some other side roads that have had a little better experience. And they're the ones who know that or think they know it.
Well, you have to be careful
Mhm.
identifying properties and that sort of thing. But I can tell you that based on our past discussions with them and DEP, the whole area doesn't meet the health code. Whether
Yeah.
they've had a physical problem or not, maybe not. There hasn't been that many physical problems, but we all know where the wastewater is going. It's going to the river. So, I mean, all the areas are almost equally in need.
Okay.
But you can confirm that with the health district too. I'm sure, they're the ones that provided us initially with the map and that sort of thing that got a little controversial, but.
Mhm.
Do you have a number for any idea on the core road, which I have the map somewhere in the notebook. It was going to be up 128 and then into the plaza. But do we have a number of how many properties want to hook up to it? And Lower River Road, it's like the most unpopular thing going down here from the way everybody talks. So I don't know what's, just throwing that out, not, I don't know.
Well, the library is certainly interested in it, and they're on Lower River Road, so
The library
I
here.
wouldn't say it's the most unpopular thing. Yeah, the
You
Hughes
mean the Hughes Library?
Yeah.
It's funny because I guess there is the well there, but it's shared by Russ. But that whole thing is kind of a joke right now with the way things are going for, that endowment. I was on that board and they have a lot of money and the building has sat empty. It's so moldy and everything in it. I don't know what you could do to remedy that, but that's probably just something
Right,
else.
but it's a virtually unusable building because there's
Yeah.
no septic
Yeah.
capacity. So it
Well,
could use septic capacity.
It could, but it was usable for 80 years or something like that, as it was. I mean, that was used for years as it was. So we can't say it's
The laws,
just,
the laws won't allow you to use it, for public gatherings without, having facilities at this
Yeah.
point.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Yeah.
it's obvious for that building. It's also obvious for the building on the other side of your place, that had a failed
Yeah.
system, and Torrington Area Health couldn't tell them to cease and desist. But there was no room for them to put in a workable legal system. So
Mhm.
Torrington Area Health had them put in whatever the next best thing was. But clearly, that house is obviously leaching directly into the river.
Right.
So,
I agree. They,
on the other side of the road, yes, those buildings on Lower River Road do have facilities now,
Yep.
but, should something, how many of them actually have backup area for a backup system, which is what Kathy
Mhm.
Weber asked for on every new installation at this point. So, looking
Right.
down the road, to
It-
include Lower River Road would be a smart thing to do, because as those systems fail,
Mhm.
as to the other side roads in town, people have weighed in, don't want to do it at this time.
Right.
So maybe it'll be
Oh, I-
20 years from now, we'll have to revisit this.
I'm not saying that it's
Go
a
up
bad
Upper
idea
River
to
Road.
go down River Road. What I'm saying is the people next door to my left, they've already made it clear they don't even want it. And if they've spent, this is not being argumentative, but if they've spent 5 nights here in the last 5 years, that would be a
Yeah.
lot, because they're just never there. I know what you mean about the septic, though. I think you're very right on that. But I don't think we should just use the library as an example, because they basically have dumped that library for the last 2 years, have done nothing with the building except take the books out, and what's happened to
Well,
that is.
all right, well,
Okay.
we can also say, how about Ian's building and even Trinity
Oh, yeah.
somewhere in the future, who could almost by themselves pay for the whole system.
Oh, sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So why would
But I
you
just
cut
want-
them
yeah.
off?
Yeah.
Can,
The Lower
we
River
get-
Road is strategically a very important setting.
but
Yeah,
it's
I
not
think you need-
included in our
Oh.
proposal today.
Yeah,
No,
I think you
not
need to
yet,
focus on
not
the
yet,
core
but-
system.
Yeah.
What's that?
I think you need to focus on the core system and get something in place
Yeah,
so that
yeah.
you have the
but
flexibility in the future
Right.
to potentially.
Right. It provides, this potentially provides a solution to people's problems down the road. There's no
Right.
doubt,
And I
which
mean-
doesn't, there's no great solution out there right now for these potentially problematic places. However, at this point, it seems like the most cost effective is to do the core, which is where we're at with 6.2 million.
And the responsibility of this committee is to educate the public as
Oh,
to
I
the
know.
value of this expenditure.
Well, I think you have to clarify that the 6.2 is more than just the core. It's the core pipe. I don't know what you call it, the main line. I'm not sure, Steve, you have a term for that, I'm sure. But it really is the facility. The facility's got to be half that cost, if not more.
Well, it's a good chunk of it.
I mean, if it's not half the cost, it's 40% of the cost. I mean, whatever the figure is, so my point is that the figure that we're quoting for a cost estimate of 6.2 million, while yes, may just be the core pipe and the core hookup, it's a facility included, and a facility that has the potential to add a substantial number of more users.
If
Do I have
required
that?
or desired. Yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
I think that's an important point to clarify, though.
This would be the first step in that journey.
Correct.
Okay, first step. So any other thoughts on the cost estimate?
Are these cost estimates? I remember going back, going back a couple of years, we were talking about, 3.2 million. And then we started talking about the grants and putting in, and we made the number much greater, asking for funds, for the maximum amount that we could get under the existing programs at that time. And so all of a sudden we were asking for 5 million instead of the 3.2. But are the estimates, I mean, has it really grown that much in the
Well,
years?
it has.
Kathy?
With inflation, I mean, those estimates were done how many years ago? Things have gone up and up and up. And then lately, in the last year, things, as I said, Massachusetts is seeing costs 30% higher than a year ago.
Yeah, but this is 100%.
Yes, but.
And I know that we were asking for, we had that figure, but I thought that figure was for the purposes of writing it, asking for grant money. And so we get $3 million from the federal government. Are we likely to have to spend all of that and whatever else we get? Is that?
I think there's a very good chance of it, but again, I like to be conservative if I can, and I'll eat those words later on, but I'd rather try to be conservative so that you do not have to go back to another referendum and start again. And again, we can't predict what's going to happen 2 or 3 years from now. And it's already been 5 years since we did those other estimates. It's been literally it'll be like a little 8 to 10 years of difference in cost with a lot of things that have happened between COVID and Ukraine and all kinds of other events in the world that have affected pricing tremendously.
We know that Woodridge Lake had a much more ambitious program than this, but they had also qualified people make cost estimates, which, when they went out to bid, didn't cover the cost of the project. So I'm not sure where they're at now, but that was a couple of years ago. They had to go back.
I don't think they've done anything.
Whatever. We're gonna find out fairly soon. Everybody knows there's been cost, pressure on these type of projects.
I mean, we have to have a number to put it up for referendum, I'm sure. But after that, the plan gets made and the final estimate gets done.
Absolutely. And then you go to bid and then the real cost. And then if there's money left over, you don't use it. But it looks to me like if the money that's left over would be loan money, and that would be good for the town to not have, have less loan money.
Yeah.
And just a reminder, Ian, the original estimate was for something sited down on the bend. It was right, down at the river.
Right.
And we all began to realize there was a number of reasons that it needed to get moved further and further up the hill. And that's where a bunch of the cost increase came from.
Okay, no, I mean, I just was wondering whether these are actual numbers that we're dealing with today. I guess they are. Price of furniture hasn't gone up 100%, but.
Wait a minute. I was just in your shop, Ian. Nice and just.
They've gone up, yes. But
Maybe you have to raise your prices.
Well, there's terrific amount of cushioning in here. I mean, under the subtotal, 20% contingency, incidentals, another 15, 30, so 35% of that subtotal, I guess.
Let me explain what that, Lisa. Let me explain what that is. A contingency is a contingency for unforeseen things because nothing's been designed yet. Incidentals are what they call, or for administration and like construction inspection of the project, construction testing. If there's a construction trailer needed, which typically there is, those are all are considered to be incidentals. So those are like soft costs that are just part of the project costs that need to be accounted for. In addition to that, up front, you're going to have obviously, if you experience legal fees, bond costs, that sort of thing, engineering costs. And so those are all covered under that estimate.
So I have a sort of a question here. We have funding, or we have a source of some funding. And it looks like close to half the project's funding of this particular cost estimate that you've brought forth at this time. The third thing on the agenda is the timeline, and the third thing on the agenda for discussion today is the timeline, which is also important because um, the funding is going to get sharpened in terms of trying to find access to more grants, I guess. And the cost is going to get sharpened as to trying to determine what the real cost will be at some point. I mean, obviously, the real cost will be when it goes out to bid, I guess. That'll be the ultimate cost determination. So maybe we should be talking about the timeline here also, so we can make some determination when the cost figures can be more accurately determined. I guess maybe the figure you have is the figure we have to bring to a town referendum, because that's the figure we have right now, but it'll get sharpened as time goes on, along with the funding. I guess that's what I'm asking for the timeline discussion also.
Okay. So here's some dates. I spent a lot of time talking to the bond counsel and working on the explanatory text. As you remember from last time, the explanatory text, which is the piece that says wastewater management project in West Cornwall Village, which is what he has to approve to send out to people as far as what our explanations. We can't tell people to vote yes or vote no. We have to tell them what we believe are the factual basis of the project. So she has approved this, which then goes to the State Election Commission to approve this is something we can send out and will be proper to put in front of the voters as an explanation of what's going on. There's a second whole pile of paper called a resolution, which is mostly deals with financing the bond, but the main consideration is having the wastewater management project in West Cornwall Village get approved by the state election people, because they have to make sure we're doing this properly. So what they would like to do is to get this, and again, it's up to them to make sure this is somewhat neutral. So anyway, so he's confident with this. He'd like to bring it to the state people this week. So then it's probably gonna take 3 weeks to get back from the state. So then in mid-May, the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen will then weigh in on this. The Planning and Zoning Commission has already passed on this project. So we'd have those commission votes in preparation for a town meeting, and we have to tell people what these dates are, because part of the explanatory text, which you haven't seen, is what Vera Deneen, the town clerk, is working up for voting procedures, absentee ballots, when's the vote going to happen, who's eligible to vote with this, because it's different than a municipal or national election. So all that work is being done and submitted to the state election people. So the thought is, if the selectmen and the Board of Finance, which both have to approve this, sign off in May, we can schedule a town meeting on, say, June 25th is the day we're going with. Have a referendum, which is the actual vote, 2 weeks later on July 9th. Both of those are Saturdays. And then we plan to have an informational Zoom meeting on June 11th. So again, in order to vote in July, we have to set dates in April in order to get this whole process in motion. And that's probably the quickest we could vote that the council feels is realistic, as far as having all those approvals set up. Certainly the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance have made it clear that they are in favor of the project, and having him draw up the explanatory text should mean it's straightforward to the state people, but they may have questions. So that's the rough timeline we're talking about. Again, thinking that we want to, somebody said we've been talking about this for 7 years. It's a good time of year to vote. People sort of, that gives us, time, and as a committee to put things out. We're pretty restricted as far as what we put out there as far as information, other than this explanatory text. We cannot influence the outcome of the election by saying everybody vote yes. But it doesn't mean we also can't have the Zoom meeting ahead of the town meeting, get questions and then have more answers if there are questions and answers at that Zoom meeting. So instead of just having the traditional town meeting ahead of the referendum, we would have a Zoom meeting ahead of the town meeting. The town meeting itself would not take any action. It would adjourn to the referendum vote 2 weeks later, and that would give people an opportunity to register for absentee ballots up to, I believe, a month ahead of the July 9th date. So again, this is in the interest of getting the word out, when these meetings are, what the voting procedures are, when the ballots are going to be available. It's a bunch of work, but I think by having this timeline established almost, I think 3 months ahead of the actual vote date, gives people an idea of what we're doing, when we're doing it, and what the process is. So, and it meets the bond council's approval.
Gordon, can I make a suggestion to us,
Yes.
to you? I think it would be advisable, given the complexity of this, to get an insert in the May Chronicle that just lays the whole thing out without any judgments. You know, as you point out, we can't be promoting it, but just puts those dates out there so people can stick the insert up on the refrigerator and know what's going on.
I think what we're planning to do is probably have an insert for June 1st Chronicle with the explanatory text in there, which will also have the voting stuff. And I know the registrars and Vera are already putting stuff about the vote and date and qualifications in the May Chronicle. So there'll be an article about voting, who's eligible, how do you register to vote. And again, people should know, if they don't know, that unlike a municipal election, you can vote on the basis of property. If your name is on a tax bill that's assessed for more than $1,000, you can vote, even if you do not live here and you're not a voter here, if you're assessed. But if you own property that's in a trust and that does not have your name on it, if you own property in an LLC that does not have your name on it, if your wife owns your house and you do not have a car that's worth more than $1,000, and you have to also be an American citizen, then you cannot vote. So again, but this is true for any town, municipal, budgetary issue. So again, we're having our budget town meeting on May 20th, and people can also vote at that if they are not an elector. And Vera keeps a list of people, and there's quite a few people on it that automatically she knows are registered to vote at a town meeting, even if they're not an elector. So again, the election people are doing a lot to try to publicize this and what the rules are. Because each state's different. Okay, so anyway, we'll be getting stuff. You know, we probably got 3 Chronicle issues there, plus, you know, their Facebook page or whatever. So we do have 3 issues that will probably cover this. So I think, I mean, again, that's one of the reasons why we're taking 4 months to do it, because we're going to try to, you know, get the word out, and I'm sure there will be discussion and whatever else, but it also gives us time and, you know, to meet again in May and talk about presentations and things. But I like the fact, in a way, the funding is fairly straightforward at this point. You know, fairly easy to explain. So anyway, that's the schedule with which we're going to, you know, again, release this to go to the state people, and we're meeting next week with the Board of Selectmen, and again, keeping the Selectmen and the Board of Finance up to date, and we anticipate a positive vote next month by both of those boards, you know, to set up the whole town meeting referendum process.
Gordon, when you have these meetings, will you tell people the site? Will you guys have already chosen the site? I mean, the select, I know we can recommend it, but the selectmen are the final say. But will people vote not knowing where it's going to be, or will you have that out there too? Because that's like a question you get all the time from people.
That is a fair question. However, in talking to Steve, I think that in order to give people a real answer, we have to, do a bunch of work that we just can't say, we're going to put it here because we know West Cornwall is tight. We know there's going to be issues. There's so many wells, there's so many tight property lines. It's going to be tight, and without his engineering firm really looking at several places, and that's going to cost time and money that we really can't tell people at this point. It's going to go where it is, because again, the town doesn't own a site at this point. We've been offered a couple places to look at, but we don't have a contract or an agreement with any property owner to cite anything at this point. So it's going to be somewhere. I mean, as the document said, it's going to be somewhere in West Cornwall at this point, but I can't really go any closer than that at this point without doing a bunch of engineering.
It won't change the price of any, well, I guess you have that contingency fund there. So, I mean, if it was one place was, a great deal more than another, the site doesn't affect the price of anything, probably because of the contingency, I would assume.
We sort of accounted for that.
Oh, okay.
So,
Thanks.
Great. So any other questions on that timeline? And again, we're going to try to get that timeline into the May Chronicle with those, those dates. The only thing I said is hearing back from the state, but we have 3 weeks to hear back, and the council felt that was more than enough time. And this isn't, this is pretty straightforward presentation.
You can send things to me and I will post it on the Cornwall Facebook pages. I'm the administrator of both Facebook pages of Cornwall.
Well, there you go. Great. Yeah, we will be hitting the social media once again. We're trying to do things right now. This explanatory text is still a draft until the state approves it. We don't want to put out anything really until that happens, other than the things about voting and the possible dates. I think it all seem reasonable. We've run them past, a bunch of different people that are involved, and I think it should work. Yes. So anyway, yeah, Priscilla.
Do you need a vote right now to move you forward?
Sure, that'll be fine. If people want to approve the explanatory text, it's sort of up to the bond council to really come up with what we say, as far as we can't say, we have to sort of tone it down and approve of every word, but it would be good to have a vote of approval of the explanatory text. If you want to make that motion, I think it certainly would cap things off.
I would like to make that motion just to get everything going forward step by step, as you've earlier explained it. Thank you, Gordon.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Okay. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So is that unanimous?
As far as I can tell, yeah.
Any nays? Anybody out there? Yeah. Great. No, that's helpful. And again, we're getting to the state and trying to stay ahead of all these required approvals. But I think this is a reasonable time frame, and I think everybody's and also having a lot of this work done ahead of time, even though we had to wait for the funding stuff, and has made this easier to pull off, fairly quickly. So thank you all for your your work there. So that's all I had. Do you want to open up to public comment now, Todd, or is there any other?
Yeah, it seems we're at public, unless there's any other comments or discussions or. So let's move on to public comment. Anybody
I have
out
a
there?
comment.
Okay, Judy, go ahead.
Oh, you know it was me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. This question is for Steve, and I'm a little bit behind on a couple of things. So, as I understand you saying, there's a new USDA application that has been submitted. So, I've always supported this project in some manner, but would much prefer it not to discharge to the river. And it sounds like it's now going to be discharging into the Mill Brook, if I just heard correctly. I've been being approached by other people who have concerns about discharging into the river. And, I've always supported an in-ground system if that was possible. So in the USDA application, do you have the analysis, Steve, for your alternative system research, the analyses that I guess is required by USDA?
Number one, we have not submitted it actually yet. And number two, no one's proposing to discharge to Mill Brook. That's absolutely not allowed. It's the only receiving waters that are acceptable to the DEEP is the Housatonic. You cannot discharge to Mill Brook.
So when someone said much further up, they meant much further up the river. Is that north?
I don't know who
of
said
the
that.
village?
No, I referred to up the hill for the siting of the plant.
Oh,
That
right.
may be what you heard. It originally was
Okay.
sited at Bend, and then we started looking at other sites, and perhaps we looked at
Yeah,
sites further
it's
away.
it's highly likely that the plant is not going to be on the river.
Okay, I have
Okay.
a question. Gordon.
Wait till,
Bernie, yeah, just hold on a second. Bernie, are you finished, Judy? Or, I mean, because the text that we're putting out is saying discharge into the Housatonic.
Oh, okay, so the analysis, the USDA application has not been yet submitted, and the analysis for the alternative systems is not currently in the application?
I'm not sure what you mean by alternative system, but the treatment system is the same as originally proposed. It just, the location's not firmly established yet. But we've given them a potential site, or in the past we did. And that probably will not change, but that's just for funding purposes to show that we do have a potentially feasible site
So
for the plan.
Is all of your field work completed for the application?
Yes,
All right, and the documents that I seem to be missing is what was called a narrative, and an explanatory text, and an estimate, and a USDA application. Might those all be available or posted somewhere?
the previous one was, and it's not going to change at all from the previous one.
The previous one, what, the
Previous
application?
application. We're simply dusting off the previous application. The town determined that it was in the best interest, actually USDA determined it was in the best interest of the town to withdraw the last application. We're simply repackaging it and resubmitting it.
septic up to the left.
Okay, thank you very much.
okay, Vern, go ahead.
Yeah, when you say this is going to be put out for bidding, put out to bid, so companies can bid on the work, is that correct? Or could companies bid on providing the plan? And if so, I would assume that we have to have had a decision made about the placement of a processing plant before they can submit plans for a whole system? Or would they be allowed to submit, companies would be then allowed to submit plans to do the work, suggesting places for a system?
No,
to be
no,
made?
to get a valid bid, at that time, the design plans for the collection system and the treatment system will be completed. And that includes a site proposed with all the site design that has to go with it. So at that point, in order to get a good bid, a site will have to be chosen at that time.
That's what I'm asking. Okay, that's good. So, so so your company has done the work that will be then available for these companies to place bids upon?
Not yet.
But, okay, so
We can't,
And how
we can't
did you-
proceed with design until the town approves the money for the design and the construction.
Right.
I just don't understand how the town can be approving anything without a plan to begin with and without costs. And we can't get any kind of reasonable amount of cost out there until people have bid on the work. So how can you get a vote done,
Well,
something that intangible?
if I can explain how projects typically get done, on rare occasions, municipalities will complete a design of any project, a road, a bridge, a building, whatever, and then they will go to bid and then go to a referendum vote after that bid. That's always a problem because timing, how long does the contractor hold his bid for while the town shuffles its feet and gets ready for a referendum town meeting vote? So 99% of the towns, or maybe not 99, the vast majority of towns will proceed with a vote based on a budget from a planning study, which is what we're doing now. We have a planning study that's laid out where the sewers are going to go, where the plant might be, the cost associated with all of that. And then once the town votes on that, then we can proceed with the final design of the project and then put it out to bid at that time.
Okay, I understand what you said, but it just seems like you're putting the cart before the horse, that's all.
Well, it's
Many
always,
pe- many
it is a
people-
chicken and the egg. I have to agree with you. It's a chicken and the egg thing, you know? It's nice to have the whole design done, the bids out, the costs in, and then go to a referendum vote, but most time the timing just doesn't work out very well with that.
Okay, I understand. I don't understand with all the buildings rented and all the buildings functioning and all the buildings not polluting, why in this day and age, in this state of the world, why this amount of money needs to go to this rather than other projects that will save people's, give people places to live, especially 100,000 refugees, but that's another story. It's all on, I guess people.
This
can-
project will give people a place to live. It will open up a lot more housing
Where?
on the area that it serves.
Oh, Ian, do you think there'll be more houses on Main Street?
There are buildings that can
Well,
be used to greater use for housing.
Well, I agree
Septic
because,
systems in place.
yeah, I mean, there's 7 unused properties right on Upper River Road. People aren't living in, it's crazy. Not that they don't need septics. Most of them have privately, recently done septics, but it is crazy, the situation. I just
true.
don't see a lot.
Okay,
I don't see a lot more
Are there-
building. on River
are there
Road.
other public comments? Are there anybody else who wants to weigh in and let us hear what your thoughts or questions are? All right, so I think we
no
can
one
bring
else-
this.
If no one
Yeah.
else has a comment, I have another question.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Is that okay? I just heard
Sure,
someone
sure.
groan.
Yep.
Sure,
So
go ahead.
back to Steve, what I have in front of me is version 3, November 2017 for the wastewater management study.
Mhm.
And the map inside is the base area with Smith Place sub area. So, and all of the calculations and estimates in that study were based on this map, and it includes 128. It includes Railroad Street and Lower River Road, and with Smith Place as a sub. So now that's changed, and we're just doing 128?
Correct. That's not the final report. I believe, Todd, there's one report that's labeled final, correct? Judy, do you have a copy of the application?
I don't.
Maybe that's the best bet, is Todd or someone can get you a copy of the actual application, previous application, I should say.
Can that be posted does this committee have its own page on the website so that everyone can see it?
No. I believe we'll get something up if there isn't already something there.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm requesting the
I think
narrative.
there is, those documents are on the website.
Yeah, we'll take a look at,
Documents, at
we'll
least the
inventory
final
what we.
report is on the website.
Okay, so I'm asking for the USDA application that was submitted. I'm asking for the USDA application that is about to be submitted. Someone said that there was an estimate, that's a document, an explanatory text, and a narrative. Are those all possible to be obtained either digitally or hard copy?
We can give you the, I believe the previous application. We can give you the current cost estimate. The explanatory text is still a draft being reviewed by the state. So as soon as we get the final copy of that, we will we'll give that to you, and we will publish all these things. We want to make sure we publish the current thing so we don't get confused with past editions of things. But if you want, we'll try to get you the previous USDA application.
Yeah,
And the
I'd
current,
appreciate
the current cost estimate.
And Gordon, you said that the Zoom informational meeting would be July the 11th. Did you mean
No.
June the 11th?
June the 11th.
Okay. Did anybody else hear July? Sorry, I might have gotten that wrong. June.
I
the
heard
11th.
June. I wrote down June, so.
I heard June also. The vote will be July 9th, I believe.
Correct.
Town
Okay.
meeting will be June
Appreciated. Thank you.
25th.
Well,
Okay. Anybody else? Don, did you have your hand up at one point?
Oh, no.
okay.
No? Okay. So anybody want to move to end the meeting?
Move to
I
adjourn.
move to end the meeting.
We have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Steve, for coming and
thanks.
taking part. And thanks, everybody, for attending. Thanks, Gordon, for all your hard work.
It'll be on the website
The
sometime later
selectmen.
tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. Yeah.
Thank you all very much. Good to see everybody. I'm glad everybody's doing well.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
and
Take care.
memories to Joanne. I'd like to
Yeah.
just say that.
Yes.
That was
Here,
Miss
nice.
her
here.
Thanks.
insights. I truly miss her
She's got a
insights.
memorial on the 23rd
Yeah.
at Trinity.
Okay. April
Okay.
23rd.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, everybody, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.